In this video, we will be reviewing how to solve the order of operations, but we're going to be throwing in absolute value symbols with our order of operations. So we need to figure out how to handle that. So let's review really quickly. The absolute value is actually the distance from 0 on a number line. And remember that absolute value is always positive, because distance is always positive. So let's review about absolute value. Remember, it always turns positive, so the absolute value of -9 is 9 spaces away from 0, so the absolute value of -9 is 9. The absolute value of 17 is just going to be 17. It's 17 spaces away from 0. Not sure what happened there. The absolute value of -16, well, that's 16 spaces away from 0. And then I have the absolute value of 1/5, and that's going to be 1/5 spaces away from 0. All right. So we can also use the absolute value as a grouping symbol. And remember, your grouping symbol are like your parentheses or a bracket. Okay, now we're just going to use those absolute value absolute value touchdown bars. And the way that we're going to do that is we're first going to solve the numbers that are inside the absolute value grouping. Then after we figure out, as soon as we get down to one number, we're going to actually find that absolute value. And then from there, we're just going to continue following the order of operations. Okay, so that's it. So let's look at our first example here. We have the negative, and then we have absolute value of 22 plus 9. Well, we need to solve this absolute value first. The absolute value of 22 is going to be 22. Then I have this negative symbol here. It needs to attack, so that becomes -22. And then I have plus 9. Now, when I go to solve this, think I have 22 negatives and 9 positives. I'm going to end up canceling some of them, which is like subtraction. So I'm left with more negatives. So my answer is negative, and the difference would be 13. So that's your solution for the first one. Same thing for number 6. Let's solve the absolute value first. So the absolute value of 10 would be 10. And then I have minus, and then you could solve this one at the same time since there's only one number. The absolute value of -4 would be +4 because it's 4 spaces away. And then you'll do 10 minus 4, and 10 minus 4 is just 6. Why don't you pause and try number 7 on your own real quick. So for this one, we have, it'll be 7 times 9 times 0. 7 times 9 will come first, which will be 63, then times 0, and then 63 times 0 will be 0. Okay. Let's look at these other simple ones. So I first have the absolute value of -10 or 100, which will be +100, divided by, and I'm going to leave this just because I want to have a discussion about it. So if you look, I have an exponent inside that absolute value symbol. So I need to solve that exponent first before I can take it out of absolute value. So now I have 100 divided by, and then if I solve 5 squared, that's 5 times 5, not 5 times 2, which is 25. And then you can think, okay, well, the absolute value of 25 is 25. So what's 100 divided by 25? And that leaves me with 4. Same thing with number 9. I have to solve this problem in here first. So I have 3, and then I take away 4. I have 3 positives and 7 negatives. There's some of them are going to cancel, which is like subtraction, and I have more negatives than I do positives, so this will be negative 4. Still in absolute value, plus 6. Now, once I look at this absolute value, what is the absolute value of negative 4? Well, the absolute value is positive 4 plus 6, because it's 4 spaces away, and then I add and I get 10. Okay, same thing with number 10. Solve the problem inside first. So negative absolute value 17 minus 2 would be 15 plus 5 squared. Now I can do my absolute value is 15, but remember that negative out here is going to come attack. So this becomes negative 15 plus 5 squared. So I'm done with my grouping. I can do my exponent. 5 squared was 5 times 5. So that's really 25. So now I have negative 15 plus 25. They have different signs. I'll have positives, 25 positives, 15 negatives. They're going to cancel, which is really subtraction, and I'm left with more positives than negatives, so my solution is going to be positive, and the difference between them is 10. Okay? Let's do 2 more complicated order of operations problems, and then I'm going to set you loose on your next page. So, here's our order of operations problems. We're still following that GEMDAS. We're just adding the absolute value as a grouping symbol. So I do need to solve this absolute value here first, because that's my grouping. So 2 plus 16 would be 18, but don't forget it's still an absolute value. I haven't touched that yet. Now I can do, well, what is the absolute value of 18? And that would be positive 18. I'm done with my grouping now. Do I have any exponents? Yes, I have this 1 squared, which is 1 times 1. 1 times 1 is 1, plus 18 times 8. I don't have any more exponents, but I do have multiplication division. I need to do 18 times 8. Off to the side. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus 6 would give me 14. This becomes 1 plus 144. And then 1 plus 144 would just leave me with 145. Okay. Let's do the next one. GEMDAS. Do I have a grouping? Yes, I do, right here in that absolute value. Remember, minus negative turns into that plus, both symbols, so that's like 18 plus 3. 18 plus 3 would be 21. Remember, you're still in absolute value. Writing everything else down. Absolute value of 21 would be 21 divided by 7 or times negative 4. So I'm done with my grouping. I do not have any exponents. Now I need to do my multiplication and division from left to right. So I have to divide first. Most of you would have missed that one. That one's the tricky part, which is 3. And then I have 3 times negative 4, which will give me negative 12. And if you need to, use the triangle. Positive slope to the top, negative sink to the bottom. So that's a positive times a negative gives me a negative solution. Okay? So what I want for you to do is I want you to try number 13 and number 14 on your own. When you're ready, unpause the video and we'll check your work. Oh, I'm sorry. For number 14, make sure you change that negative 12 there. You have negative 2 in your notes, I believe. Make sure you changed it to be a negative 12. I apologize about that. So for this one, I have GEMDAS. I have a grouping, which is my absolute value, so that would be 3. No more groupings, no exponents. I have to do this division. Negative 36 divided by 8 gives me a negative 4. Remember your triangle. Positive slope to the top. Negative divided by positive gives me a negative 4 minus 2 times 3. Still need to do this multiplication. 2 times 3 is 6, so I have negative 4 minus 6. And then I have 4 negatives and 6 negatives all together, so I have negative 10. For number 14, grouping, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract. My grouping is that absolute value, which is 12. Absolute value of negative 12 is positive 12. It's the distance from 0. Then no exponents. Here's my division. 12 divided by negative 6 would be negative 2. Remember your triangle if you need to. Positive with a negative gives me a negative solution. Done with my multiplication division. Now I have to do addition, subtraction in front to back order, left to right. So 23 plus 9 would have given you 32 plus that negative 2. And if you want to, you can put it in parentheses. You don't have to. Now these are different signs. I'll have 32 positives and 2 negatives. They're going to cancel, which is like subtraction. And I have more positives left, so it should be positive 30. All right, why don't you pause and try 15 on your own, and when you're ready, unpause, and we will go over number 15 before we jump to 16. So I have grouping, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So grouping first. So that's 3 times negative 5, which will give me negative 15. Still an absolute value. Make sure you don't make them curve. Make sure you keep them straight. Absolute value of negative 15 would be positive 15 because it's the distance from 0. Now I don't have any more groupings. I don't have any exponents. There's no multiplication division, but I do have addition, subtraction. 10 plus 15 would be 25. Minus that negative 2. Remember, minus negative turns to a plus, so this becomes 27. Okay, same process for number 16. Go ahead, try that one. So grouping, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract. Grouping first. So 48 divided by negative 4 would end up being negative 12 in absolute value still. But then that turns into positive 12 because it's an absolute value. So no more groupings, no more exponents. I do have multiplication here. I need to do 25 times 12. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 0 for place value. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. Add those together, so I get 0, 300. Plus 9. Last step is 309. Okay? All right, why don't you go ahead and try 17 and 18 on your own. Try 17 and 18 on your own. Unpause when you're ready to check. So GEMDAS. I have a grouping. I have to do 6 plus 14, which gives me 20. Still an absolute value. Solve the absolute value, which is positive 20. So no more groupings, no more exponents. I have to do this multiplication here. 4 times negative 20, negative 4 times 20 would be negative 80. Think of your triangle. Positive slope to the top, negative sink to the bottom. Negative times a positive is a negative. And then I have the minus 12. That's 80 negatives, and 12 more negatives give me a total of 92 negatives. Now for number 18, make sure you followed order of operations within that absolute value. You have to still follow the order of operations inside of that grouping symbol. So you should have done the multiplication first. So I would have had absolute value of 18 plus 27 divided by negative 5. And then I have 18 plus 27 still, which is 45 in absolute value, divided by negative 5. And then I'm going to solve that last step, which is the absolute value of 45, which is positive 45, divided by negative 5. And then the last step is to divide that. You should have gotten negative 9. And use that triangle, positive, negative, negative. Positive divided by a negative gives me a negative solution. If you have any questions, make sure that you ask your teacher.